I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I always believed I knew my wife, Lisa. We've been married for about 8 years, and for the most part, I thought we had a solid, if not perfect, relationship. She's smart, ambitious, and a little bitchy sometimes. Okay, a lot bitchy, but I loved her despite that. She could be a real firecracker, but beneath that tough exterior, I always felt there was some genuine affection. At least, I wanted to believe that. Things started to feel off about 2 months ago. Lisa's been more distant, snapping at me over small things, canceling plans at the last minute, and spending more time on her phone. She started coming home later than usual, claiming work or some girls' night out. But I noticed she was hiding her phone more, locking it when I entered the room. I didn't push at first, figuring maybe I was just overthinking it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, especially when I caught her in a lie about where she was one night. It all came to a head last weekend during a tournament trip for our daughter, Emma. Emma's in debate, and Lisa and I have always gone along to support her. I was supposed to drive with Lisa and Emma to the hotel, but I had a work thing pop up last minute. So, I told Lisa to go ahead with Emma and I'd meet them later. I figured nothing was wrong, just a typical tournament weekend. But what I didn't count on was the hotel security calling me late at night. That call was the beginning of everything falling apart. I was half asleep when the phone rang, and the security guard on the line sounded strangely awkward. He told me they received noise complaints from the room Lisa was sharing with Emma. Said the noise was loud, persistent, and disturbing the peace. I immediately felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Noise complaints at that hour. That was strange, especially because Emma's a kid, and I couldn't imagine her causing trouble like that. I asked the guard if he could tell me anything else, but he just mentioned that the room was unusually loud, things like shouting, loud music, and what sounded like deep, adult conversations. I sat up straight, heart pounding, trying to process what I was hearing. Deep, adult conversations. That didn't sound right for a room with my daughter. I demanded to speak to Lisa, but they said she wasn't answering her phone. That was odd, too. Lisa was always glued to her phone, always texting or scrolling. If she was innocent, she'd pick up right. But she didn't. I decided then and there I'd better get to that hotel myself. As I was rushing out the door, I felt this strange mix of anger, confusion, and dread. I remember thinking, what the hell is she doing? Why would she have her room so loud? Why was she ignoring her phone? And more than anything else, I was starting to realize that maybe I'd been blind for too long. Maybe the signs were there, and I just refused to see them because I didn't want to believe my wife could do something like this. I got in my car and drove almost on autopilot, my mind racing. When I arrived at the hotel, everything looked normal from the lobby. But as I went up to the floor, a strange feeling hit me. I could hear faint, muffled voices through the door. Not just normal talking, it sounded like heated adult voices. And then I heard it. That unmistakable sound of moaning which made my stomach churn. I froze outside the door, heart pounding so loud I was sure everyone in the hallway could hear it. I tried to listen closer and I could distinctly hear Lisa's voice, low and breathless, along with another, deeper voice. That was the moment I knew. I knew she was cheating on me, with our daughter's debate coach. I don't know how I knew, but I just did. It was like a punch to the gut. All the times I'd seen her dismiss him, brush off my concerns, everything suddenly clicked into place. My wife, the tough, bitchy woman I'd loved and trusted, was screwing around with someone I thought was just a coach. That's when I decided I wouldn't let this slide. I had to confront her, but I also knew I needed to plan carefully. This wasn't just about catching her in a lie. It was about ending the betrayal, about making her see that I wasn't some fool to be played. I stayed outside that door for what felt like forever, listening to the sounds coming from inside. I didn't want to go in then. I didn't want to be the idiot who burst in on a scene that I'd never forget. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures of the door number just in case. I was trying to keep my composure, but inside I was a mess of anger, hurt, and betrayal. Everything I'd believed about my marriage, about Lisa, was crashing down around me. And I knew from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. I spent the next few hours trying to process what I had just overheard and seen. I wasn't just angry, I was furious. How could she do this? After everything we had built, after all the talks about honesty and trust, she was out there, screwing her debate coach during our daughter's tournament. I kept telling myself that I should just walk away, that it wasn't worth it, but the betrayal burned too deep. I felt sick. It was like someone had torn out my insides and left me hollow. I couldn't sleep that night. Instead, I kept going over the details, trying to piece together what I knew and what I suspected. I wondered how long this had been going on, how many lies she'd told me before. I kept asking myself what I did wrong, or what I didn't do enough of to deserve this. I kept picturing her face, that bitchy smirk she always had when she thought she was right, and it made my blood boil. But mostly I felt a crushing sadness. We had a life together, a daughter who looked up to us. I had trusted her with everything, and she had thrown it all away for some guy. The morning came way too fast. I knew I couldn't just sit there stewing in my own head. I decided I had to confront her, but I wanted to do it right on my terms. I didn't want her to deny everything. I wanted her to face what she'd done. So I went home, took a shower, and sat down at the computer. I started planning my next move, thinking about what I would say, how I'd handle her reaction, and what proof I had. I also knew I needed backup, someone I could trust, someone who wouldn't spread my personal mess all over town. I reached out to my best friend, Mike. I told him everything, how I'd caught her, what I overheard, and how betrayed I felt. Mike was furious too. He told me I was a damn fool if I didn't confront her immediately, but I also knew I had to be careful. If I just barged in without a plan, she'd deny everything, spin some bullshit story, or worse, call the cops or accuse me of stalking or harassment. So I set a trap. I told her I was going to be late at work, but instead I waited until she was supposed to be home. I set up a hidden camera in the bedroom, aimed at the spot where I knew she'd be. I wanted to see her reaction when she thought she was alone. I also kept my phone ready to record any conversation. When she finally came home, she looked irritated as usual, snapping at Emma about her homework and complaining about the stupid debate coach. She tried to act like nothing was wrong, but I could see her eyes flickering nervously. She knew she'd been caught. I could see it in her face. As she settled on the couch, I pressed record and started questioning her, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. I asked her why she'd been so distant, why she'd lied about where she was that night. She rolled her eyes, huffing something about how I was overreacting, that I was paranoid. She claimed she was just working late, that she and the coach had a lot of business to discuss, and that I was being paranoid as always. She called me controlling, jealous, insecure, typical shit she's thrown at me before when she didn't want to admit something. But I wasn't buying it anymore. The evidence was stacking up too high, and her attitude only confirmed my suspicions. I kept pushing her, asking about the night in question, about the noise, about her conversations. That's when she snapped. She yelled that I was a pathetic little man, that I was jealous of her success, and worse. She accused me of spying, of invading her privacy, and she said I was imagining things. But I had enough. I told her I had proof, video, pictures from the hotel, and her own damn voice on the recordings. She went silent for a moment, the usual bitchy smirk fading from her face. That's when she finally broke down and started lying even more, trying to deny everything, claiming I was making it all up, that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was just jealous of her hot coaching guy, that this was just a stupid mistake. She was so brazen, so full of herself. I felt my stomach turn. I'd never seen her like this, so unapologetic, so indifferent to the damage she'd caused. And deep inside I felt this ache, a mixture of heartbreak and rage. I'd loved her once, believed in us, and now I saw her for what she really was, a liar, a cheat, a selfish bitch who thought she was above it all. I didn't say much after that. I just turned off the recorder, grabbed my stuff, and left the house. I knew in that moment I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I had enough to file for divorce, enough to show that she'd been unfaithful and that she'd lied to my face. I'd been an idiot to trust her, but I also knew I couldn't keep living in this betrayal. I had to make a decision, one that would finally put an end to the nightmare she dragged me into. As I drove away, I realized I was already past the point of no return. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about reclaiming myself after being so thoroughly blindsided. I'd never felt so hurt, so humiliated, and yet part of me was relieved. At least now I knew the truth, and from here I would do whatever it took to move on without her. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of clarity. I kept replaying everything: the hotel, her face, her voice, the lies. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. It was like my entire world had been turned upside down overnight. I had every reason to lose my shit, but I knew I had to stay composed, at least outwardly. I couldn't have her thinking I was some angry lunatic. I needed to play it smart. I started gathering all the evidence I had: screenshots, recordings, hotel pictures. I knew I'd need those if I decided to fight for divorce or even custody of Emma. I also contacted a lawyer the very next morning, knowing I had to be prepared for the worst. I didn't want to get blindsided by her or her family. Lisa was bitchy enough to try and spin this as my fault, blame me for invading her privacy, or accuse me of being obsessive. That's what she does, twist everything around to make herself look innocent. But here's the thing: she wasn't going to get away with it. Not this time. I was done pretending. I wouldn't let her lie her way out of this. That night I sat her down again, this time with the proof in hand. I told her I knew everything about the hotel, about her lies, about the affair. She started to deny it again, of course, calling me crazy, jealous, and paranoid. She threw a fit, shrieking about how I was ruining her career, how she didn't need a man who didn't trust her. She said I was controlling and insecure. But I wasn't having it. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her she was a selfish, manipulative bitch who thought she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. I told her she'd ruined everything we had: our marriage, our family, Emma's happiness. She looked furious but also scared, like I'd finally caught her in the act. The mask of bitchy arrogance slipped for a moment and I saw her for what she really was: a liar and a cheat. I told her I was done, that I was filing for divorce, that I wanted her out of the house. She screamed at me, calling me every name in the book, trying to guilt me, trying to make me feel like I was the one at fault. But I stayed firm. I knew I had to end this for good. I couldn't keep living in her web of lies and betrayal. I had to dig in my heels and do what was right for myself, for Emma, for whatever shred of dignity I had left. The next few days were chaos. She sent me texts trying to apologize, then denying everything, then blaming me for spying on her. Her mother even called, telling me I was overreacting, that Lisa was stressed and going through a tough time, that I should support her. I told her to back off. I didn't want to hear her bullshit. My priority was to protect Emma and make sure I had full custody if it came to that. I met with my lawyer and we started drawing up the paperwork. I also made plans to move out of the house. Luckily, I had some savings, enough to rent a small apartment nearby for now. I couldn't bear to stay under the same roof with her, not after what I'd found out. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, I was taking control of my life again. Meanwhile, Lisa was spiraling. She tried to turn things around, calling me obsessive for wanting to see Emma, saying I was trying to turn her against her, but I knew the truth. I knew she'd been lying for months, maybe longer, and I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I wanted to be strong for Emma's sake, for my own. I realized I couldn't fix this marriage, not with her still lying and sneering her way through it. The trust was gone, completely. One night I found myself sitting alone in the empty apartment, staring at my phone. I thought about everything: the betrayal, the lies, the pain. I felt a deep ache in my chest, like a part of me had been ripped out. But part of me also felt a strange sense of hope. I was finally free, even if it hurt like hell. I knew I had to rebuild, to find a way to move on, to let go of the woman I loved and trusted for so long. I reflected on what I'd learned. Never ignore the little signs, I told myself. Never dismiss your gut feelings. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. I also realized that sometimes, the biggest act of love you can give yourself is to walk away from someone who doesn't deserve your trust or respect anymore. And that's where I am now. Still hurting, still trying to figure out what's next. But I know one thing for sure: I'll never let myself be blind again, and I won't let someone else betray me the way Lisa did. If there's one lesson I'd give to anyone reading this, it's that betrayal cuts deep, but you can come out the other side stronger. You just have to be willing to face the truth, even when it's ugly. The days turned into weeks, and everything felt like a blur of legal meetings, packing boxes, and trying to keep my composure around Emma. I didn't want her to see how much her mother's betrayal was affecting me, so I kept my cool in front of her. She was only 12, and I didn't want her to think our marriage falling apart was somehow her fault. Still, it hurt to see her confused, asking questions I didn't have the answers to. The biggest challenge was dealing with Lisa. She was relentless in her attempts to manipulate the situation. Every time I tried to set boundaries, she'd throw a tantrum, calling me cold, accusing me of trying to ruin her career and pretending she was the victim. She insisted she deserved privacy and respect, all while sneaking around behind my back. Her bitchiness was on full display, and honestly, it made me sick. One day she showed up at my new apartment unannounced with tears in her eyes. She claimed she was sorry, that she'd made a mistake, and she begged me to forgive her. That was her usual script: fake tears, guilt-tripping, trying to make me feel guilty for wanting a divorce. I just looked at her coldly and told her I wasn't falling for it. I told her that I'd heard everything, seen everything, and that I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I told her she'd lost her chance. If she wanted to be with that guy or anyone else, she could do it without me. She screamed, called me a heartless bastard, and stormed out. But I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me anymore. I knew I had to stay strong for myself and for Emma. That's when I finally made the decision to push ahead with the divorce. I couldn't trust her, and I refused to be a pawn in her game. I wanted to rebuild my life, even if it meant starting from scratch. Meanwhile, Emma was struggling. She was too young to fully understand what was happening, but she sensed something was wrong. She would ask why Mom was sad or why she didn't come home often. It broke my heart to see her like that, but I did my best to be honest with her without exposing all the ugly details. I told her that sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, but I was there for her, and we'd get through it together. I promised her she was my priority, and I'd do everything I could to keep her safe. During this time, I also started seeing a counselor. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge me or try to give me false hope. My counselor helped me process the complicated emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, and figure out how to move forward. I realized I'd been holding on to hope that Lisa would change, that she'd realize what she was throwing away, but I finally understood I couldn't count on that anymore. I needed to focus on myself and Emma. One thing I learned from this whole mess: betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes you. I found myself questioning who I was, what I believed in. I kept asking myself if I'd missed signs or if I'd been blind. But with time, I began to see that I'd done everything I could. I was honest, caring, and loyal. It was Lisa's choices that shattered our marriage, not me. That realization gave me a sliver of peace, even amid the pain. I also understood something else. No matter how much I wanted to make her see her mistakes, she was too caught up in her own lies and excuses. She was convinced she was the victim, that I was the one causing problems. That's what made her so bitchy. She never took responsibility. It was easier for her to blame me, to paint herself as the wronged woman, than to admit she'd been unfaithful. That's why I decided I'd let her spin her stories, but I wouldn't buy into them. I knew the truth, and that's what mattered. So here I am now, trying to rebuild what I lost. I've been focusing on my work, spending extra time with Emma, and slowly I'm starting to feel like I can breathe again. It's not easy. I still get angry, still feel the sting of betrayal. But I'm learning to stand tall and not let her drama drag me down. I want Emma to grow up knowing she's loved, and that her dad is strong enough to move on from someone who didn't deserve him. Looking back, I realize this experience has changed me. I won't be naive anymore, and I definitely won't let anyone treat me like a fool. Trust is fragile, but I believe you can rebuild your life after it's been broken, if you're willing to face the ugly truth and do what's best for yourself. I'd tell anyone in a similar situation: don't wait for the other person to come around. Take control. Protect your heart, your sanity, and your dignity, because in the end, that's all you really have. The months since the divorce have been a whirlwind of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and finally, a slow sense of hope. I won't lie, it's been the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Watching Lisa try to spin the story, act innocent, and pretend everything's fine was infuriating, but I stayed firm. I knew what I saw and what I heard. I refused to let her manipulate her way out of this one. My focus now is on rebuilding my life and making sure Emma feels safe and loved. I've been working on myself more than ever. Started exercising regularly, reconnecting with old friends, and even returning to some hobbies I'd neglected. It's not about forgetting what happened, but about reclaiming my sense of self. I realized I'd spent so many years trying to please her, to keep the peace, that I lost sight of who I was. Now, I'm slowly rediscovering the guy I used to be, the one who believed in honesty and loyalty, who wanted a life built on trust and respect. The thing about betrayal is that it leaves scars, but those scars can be a source of strength. I've come to accept that Lisa's betrayal was her choice, and I can't change that. But I can control how I respond to it. I won't let her define me or turn me into someone I don't want to be. I've learned to stand up for myself, to trust my instincts, and most importantly, to value my own happiness. It's ironic how something so painful forced me to grow, but I suppose that's life sometimes. Emma has been doing better too. She's adjusting to the new routine, spending more time with me and her grandparents. I make sure to be open with her, explaining that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and that it's okay to feel upset or confused. I tell her that she's loved always and that her happiness is what matters most. Watching her smile a little more each day gives me hope that, despite everything, we're going to be okay. I've also started dating again, cautiously. It's weird, honestly. I haven't been with anyone seriously since Lisa, and honestly I was hesitant to trust again. But I realized that holding on to bitterness wouldn't serve me. I've gone out a few times, and it's been a reminder that life moves on, and there are good people out there who don't hurt you. Still, I'm not rushing. I want to be sure I'm ready before I jump back into anything serious. For now, just focusing on healing and moving forward. Looking back, I see how much I learned from this ordeal. Never ignore your gut feelings. Trust is everything, but it's fragile and can be broken easily. When you see red flags, don't brush them off or tell yourself it's just small things. Pay attention. And if you're betrayed, don't beat yourself up about it. It's not your fault. You did your best, and sometimes people just aren't who they pretend to be. I also learned that revenge isn't worth it, at least, not in the way you might think. I didn't want to hurt Lisa for the sake of revenge. I wanted to reclaim my dignity and peace of mind. I did that by walking away, not by engaging in petty fights or spreading rumors. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well after a betrayal, showing that you're stronger, happier, and more confident without someone who hurt you. That's the real victory. Most of all, I've realized that the pain eventually fades, especially when you focus on healing and growth. The betrayal still stings, but it no longer controls me. I'm learning to let go of the anger and resentment, to forgive myself for trusting her, and to accept that some things are just beyond your control. That's part of life: falling, getting hurt, and then picking yourself up again. As I sit here reflecting on everything, I feel a sense of closure. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've learned. I've learned that the only person responsible for my happiness is me, and I have the power to create a better future. I hope anyone going through something similar finds their own strength, because if I can come out of this battered, broken even, and still stand tall, so can you. Life keeps moving, and so should we. Looking back, I realize this whole ordeal has changed me in ways I never expected. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches resilience. I've learned that even when someone you trust goes behind your back, you still have the strength to pick yourself up and keep going. Trust is fragile, but your own self-worth is. That's what I hold on to now, knowing I deserve better, that I don't have to accept being lied to or manipulated. The truth is, I'm still healing. I still feel the sting of what Lisa did, and I probably always will to some extent. But I also feel a sense of liberation. I no longer feel trapped by her lies or her games. I've taken back control of my life, and I'm building it on honesty and respect for myself and Emma. I want her to grow up knowing that she's loved and that her dad is someone who fights for what's right, even when it's hard. One thing I've realized is that the best revenge isn't some grand scheme or revenge plot. It's simply living well after being wronged, showing that despite everything, you can find happiness again. It's about proving to yourself that you're stronger than the pain, that you're capable of creating a life that's authentic and true. And I hope that anyone reading this who's going through something similar understands that they're not alone and that healing is possible. I've also come to accept that sometimes people aren't who they seem to be. Lisa was a good actress. She played her role well for years. But beneath that, she was selfish and manipulative. It's a harsh lesson, but one I wouldn't trade. It taught me to be more cautious, more aware, and to listen to my instincts. Because when you ignore your gut, you get burned. Now I trust myself more than ever. Most importantly, I've learned to forgive myself for trusting her, for staying too long, for not catching on sooner. Forgiveness isn't about excusing her actions. It's about freeing myself from the bitterness that would otherwise consume me. Forgiving myself has been the hardest part, but it's also the most freeing. I realize I'm only human, and I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. Finally, I want to say that this experience has given me a new perspective on life. I no longer take for granted the simple things: honest conversations, genuine connection, trust. I value my peace of mind more than ever. I want to set a good example for Emma, to teach her that honesty and integrity matter, and that even when life throws you a curveball, you can come out stronger if you keep your head up. Life isn't perfect, and maybe it never will be. But I've learned that you can survive your worst fears and come out on the other side. That betrayal doesn't have to define you, as long as you find the courage to face the truth and move forward. I hope everyone reading this finds their strength, because no matter how dark it gets, there's always a way back to the light. You just have to be willing to walk the path, one step at a time.